And I would like right away to have your input and your reflections on what we just heard. Basically, the Prime Minister of Lower Saxony said, Clinton is right, it's about the economy, stupid. And then comes a couple of other points. But is it about the economy when liberals want to win a state?
I thought that speech was fantastic.
Okay, she can cut it off here and we can go
seriously, I mean, and I think I think we have 20 candidates for president now. You might enter, and that you'll find the others copying. But I mean, even today, Joe.
Please let me stay in Hanover.
You stay, okay. But you know, even today, Joe Biden, who announced his candidacy for president, I mean, what he said is that we really have a battle for the soul of America, and that America is an idea, and the idea that he is fighting for is really the idea that you just articulated. When you talked about work giving hope, that work gives meaning. You know, there's a big conversation now in the States about the quote, the dignity of work. You talked about the unheard, you know, not being in this room. And unfortunately, so many of the unheard feel totally, they have lost trust, and they've lost trust for many reasons. The system is not working for them, and they feel that the people with the money who make the campaign contributions historically get to call the shots. So I think you did a fantastic job of identifying the nature of the challenge and really laying down the gauntlet to progressives around the world that if we want to win again, to win more, we need to make sure that we keep the focus where the people are and to be understanding where they're coming from.
One of the tweets that I read from you was that Democrats need to understand the elections will be won in places like Lordstown. So it's not just about the people, it's also about places. What does that mean? What's Lordstown?
Lordstown is a town in Ohio that used to be big in the steel, that part of the country, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. These were the states that got a lot of publicity in the last election because particularly Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan were places that had traditionally been going to the Democrats running for president. But Donald Trump got those people. And it came as a big shock, but I think, you know, looking back, maybe it shouldn't have. But these are folks, and I think the very title of this talk was, you know, how do we stand up for the people in places that are being left behind? This is such a massive challenge because not everybody, you know, we spend a lot of time thinking about how are we going to retrain people. And so a lot of people, you know, the digital, and you know, digital is becoming so big, but not every coal miner, not every steel worker can become a software coder. Not everybody can be retrained to be a phlebotomist, you know, the person who takes blood. And this is much of the retraining that is taking place. And so I think we have to do you know, a much better job, not only of preparing the younger people for a different future. That's frankly a much easier path. But to figure out how we work, you know, with those who have been displaced and dispossessed from work that probably generations in their family have done.
There's sometimes a certain suspicion that this means that you will go back to the male, white, working man.
Well, this is, I mean, and you know, if you look about why Trump won, he said, we're going to make America great again. This was his theme. This is what all of those hats say, the Make America Great Again hats. And so he is trying to put in the minds of the people that by being president, he will bring those jobs back for them. And what we have to do, I think, as Democrats in the States, as progressives everywhere, is prepare all of our people, no matter where they're born, no matter, you know, their socioeconomic, their race, anything, to prepare them for a very different world. And that is the project, that is the challenge. I think there are some very good ideas, some really important work being done in our country and in other countries as well. I'm optimistic. I really do believe that in 2020 we're going to elect a Democrat again, and I think it's going to be a very, very different conversation a couple of years from now. And frankly, some of us, we came this time not only to learn from you, but we came because we are so upset about what Donald Trump has done to destroy the transatlantic relationships. And we wanted all of you to know from us personally that we're determined for a much better and different future.
Stefan, maybe I can briefly come back to you, because within the German social democracy, there is also this suspicion that when you talk about work and talk about bringing, that when you reflect on what you just heard, that basically you think also about the male working class, and that you forget the women, you forget the migrants. So how can you frame progressive politics, go back to the places that you left behind, go back to the people that feel excluded, that are the steel workers, that are the car workers in the US, and not at the same time having excluded the new other people that might vote for you as well? So how do you do that?
So first of all, I was not only speaking about men and not about German men. I'm far distanced from that. I feel that the thought of cohesion and solidarity means all of the members of the society, independently whether they are born in Germany or not, independently there are man or female, whatever. And there are some special points in the German discussion. We have to bring again more value to very important jobs. For example, nursing in Germany mostly is a female job, and it's underpaid. And that's why we are really in trouble because of, for example, the care for elderly people in Germany. And I feel some of the main tasks, for example, of social democratic, is to criticize hard a system which is over-economicized very intensively and underpaid, especially for those who are working in. And if we are so successful in this discussion, we can demonstrate whom we are talking about, especially in this case for women. But that's not the only, the one point. Another one, all the technical jobs in Germany, for example, that famous German engineers, are mainly men. So our task is to support, especially young women, to go into these jobs, and not only to change the jobs, but also the culture of the companies inside. I'm in the supervisory board of WEIL, and I know very clearly what I'm talking about. That is I feel it's a chance for social democracy in Germany to demonstrate what the idea of cohesion and solidarity brings fortune to all the society, and that's what we have to do in the years to come.
MARIJE LAFFEBER, you're the vice president, the deputy. Oh, I wrote it down. I knew that I would make a mistake. Now, I spelled your name correctly, but I didn't get your title right. Help me. Deputy Secretary. The Deputy Secretary of the PS. So you have the overview of all what's going on in Europe. Is there a kind of success model where you would say, yes, it's not just easy to talk about inclusion and cohesion, but it's also working? Being a social democratic party for everybody really means you include everybody? Where would you kind of have us look to?
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to thank you, and also like to thank the Prime Minister, because I think it was a wonderful speech and very inspiring. I come from the neighboring area in the Netherlands, from Groningen, so I'm very proud always to see successful neighbors, because that could help us in the Netherlands as well to turn things around.
Just organize him a town hall meeting, he'll come.
No, is there a successful model? No, I think at the moment not, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Just those two guys? Nobody else?
No, it's like, no, that's not true. No, we have, of course, some successes, but a successful model, I don't think, is there. And also, I think it is important. We, as a Party of European Socialists, we work in 28 different EU member states. And what I try to always explain is that we have 28 different cultures, 28 different histories. So what is really an important difference between us and, for example, conservatives, is that at least we have some common values we share. So we have a program, we have our core principles we try to defend, but it is the truth that there is a different history, for example, in a country like Greece, where until relatively recent there has been a dictatorship, or Finland, or Germany, or let's say Hungary, or the Netherlands, we all have a different history and a different, let's say, background. However, we try to share the common thing we have, and that's our values. How this is playing out, I think many of the things have been said already about the crisis in the progressive movement. There are some very good examples, and I can be very proud of this. For example, Antonio Costa in Portugal is doing very, very well. I think the secret of his success is that Portugal came out of a situation where there was the economic financial crisis, and they were really pushed to do a lot of austerity measures, so to cut basically on everything we as progressive think is important. So to cut a little bit on healthcare, to cut a little bit on education, to cut a little bit on childcare, to cut on the pensions, to cut on social housing. And these are things I think are totally wrong. So when Antonio Costa came to power, he said, I'm going to do things differently. And first of all, I want to abolish this agenda of austerity only, because he believed sincerely that the power of a strong economy was more in investment. We have to invest in education. Why? Because we need people to be educated in order to find good jobs. And when they have the good jobs, they pay taxes. And these taxes they pay for better education. So it's like a vision for the future. And I think he did quite well. So then we have another success story is in Spain. And there we can see a new prime minister, Pedro Sanchez, who became, in a way, coincidentally, a prime minister, is now running a campaign, and hopefully by the end of this month will be elected to continue doing his job. But he very much invested in the equality agenda. So to invest in gender equality. And one of the things he has done is to have a majority of women in his government, but also not just to have women in the traditional, let's say, weak and soft portfolios, but to make a clear decision that women shall lead in economical and financial, so let's say the hard stuff, portfolios, which I think they're doing quite well. And so he's now leading the polls, and I think it can be successful. We see in the north, we hope to have a new wave of optimism and strength coming from Scandinavia. So we have recently done a good election result in Sweden. We're leading the government again with Stefan Löfven. But also we just, a couple of days ago actually, by slight majority, slight difference of votes, but it doesn't matter, in the end, won the elections in Finland. So another prime minister could come, leading a government and promoting progressive policies.
It's very interesting that you started your speech by saying there's no good example, and then you kind of continued on and on and on.
No, it's like, unfortunately, I come from the Netherlands, and the Netherlands is like a laboratory of all kind of experiments. And in our country, society and politics are very fragmented. We are not the only country, and you know we can brag about the successes, but I think we have to be realistic. That's another problem for Dutch. We are quite pragmatic. Look at the situation in France, look at the situation in Ireland, look at the situation in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Austria. It could be much better. It is not the case. So there we definitely have to analyze what is going on, and I think we have to really look into the mirror, because to be honest, talking about progressives and social democrats, we are of course a progressive party, and we've been around the block for a large number of years. We have claimed many successes, and I think we have contributed to let's say, a strong welfare state, to decent jobs, all these education, have access for everybody. It's like we have really increased life standards for people in Europe. However, now I think it's come to a point that we have to renew seriously, because in some countries, like the ones I mentioned, the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Germany, in France, there is the rise also of the green parties, for a good reason.
Before we go there, before you go there, let me include our colleague from Hungary. The reason why I want to get you into the debate right at this point is that you can very exactly tell us what went wrong in Hungary. When we had first a small talk before this debate, you basically said, look, in Hungary the populists have overtaken our society, not just the state, but the economy and the whole society. So we are far ahead of what can happen to other countries. Can you pinpoint us to one or two things that you did wrong, that the other countries, parties, whoever should not do?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question.
Sorry. I know.
First of all, I became an MP after 2010, so
it's not you personally, okay.
I don't know how to govern because I wasn't there. But yes, the first step is a failure of a progressive government. This is the first step. And I just wanted to warn everybody who's still in government somehow, locally or on the state level, that once you let a populist to the government, and what we saw in the last 10 years, there is no going back. So you have to know that Viktor Orbán won his first election in 2010 with a 2/3 majority with the good old electoral system. That's another question, that the first thing he changed, just the constitution, the media law, and the electoral system. And since then, for example, last spring, Fidesz got 2.5 million votes. The opposition got also 2.5 million votes. And they still have 2/3 majority in the parliament. And the whole opposition got less than 1/3 seats in the parliament. But the biggest problem is that after 2010, they started to restructure the whole country systematically. It's nothing about good economy. It's nothing about good governance. The only goal is to ensure their power forever. This is the only thing they see. Whether it's serving this goal is good, what is not serving this goal is, should be demolished. And, you know, it works. So today, the thing we say state capture, it's already done, I think in the last circle. So the Constitutional Court is not a constitutional court which is something part of checks and balances. They are proudly say that they are for serving the government. The National Bank is for serving the goals of government. And it's all the same for to the local government office, to the secret service, to the police, everything. So the system started to work. On the other hand, which I want to warn everybody in Europe and the United States also, because I think you have a really tough populist there, is media. And just look at how Trump started to fight against free media. Just today, news, international institution just observed Hungarian media. Today, news, 80% of the current Hungarian media, television, radio stations, everything, newspapers, 80%, more than 80% is directly owned and governed by Fidesz or the government. And it's not like you have a rightist media, you have direct propaganda, which means that the government is good and the opposition and the civic society are bad. These are the news. And you should know that the people on the countryside today only get these news. And one last just number to understand what, not understand, you cannot understand, you have to come there and try it. I always say that when I'm talking about the Western European audience these days, I feel like myself I'm coming from the Jurassic Park or a zoo. I'm answering you, I'm feeling the same. Living in this country as an opposition politician. But in the first 3 months, the Hungarian government, not Fidesz the party, the Hungarian government from budget money spent 50 million euros for billboards and paid ads. The whole opposition got 1 million euro for the whole EU elections. The right is, the left is, everybody who runs in the election. So the government and the governmental party spent 50 times more money before the campaign that we all together have for the campaign. And you can ask what we are waiting in May 26. I can tell you we will not change the world in this election, but of course we have some tools, and one tool is to go back personally to the people, because this is what we can do now.
When we stick for a second with the failures of progressive movements, would you say one of the failures was, we heard these words like emotions, feelings, appearance in the panel that we listened to before? Would you say that your party was not good in emotionalizing issues?
It's more difficult what my party did, because it was a coalition government with the liberals.
Okay,
we changed our prime ministers, and we just got the economic crisis at our last year of our governments. So it was like a disaster, it's true. But I think we progressives, leftists, liberals, should decide, honestly, whether we are servants of the globalization or servants of our people. Because we cannot wait to the voters to believe us that we can change their small little life if we don't give the sign of it. And I can tell you, yes, the last time we were governing, we made big cuts to save the country, budget cuts, taking away pensions, taking away fees, everything, and started to make a new taxation on the banks. But to be honest, when Viktor Orbán came, he made 10 times bigger the taxation on banks. And everybody from our progressive side were shouting, oh, these banks will leave Hungary, these international companies will close and go away. Nobody went away. Everybody paid the money. So it's just, when I'm talking about, you have to at least talk, on the other hand, act when you are there as a leftist. If you want to reach our core voters, we already left.
I would nevertheless like to stick with the question of the emotions for a second. Stefan Weil, you're not, as far as I know, you're not the very emotional kind of Leonardo DiCaprio whatsoever type. So what about, what about emotions?
Well, I'm a typical man from the northern part of Germany. We are a little bit calm and quiet, you're right. But that's not the problem in communicating with the people. The most important currency of political success is not charisma or something else, or sex appeal, or whatever you want. It is credibility. If people feel you say what you think and you do what you say, and you prove this for a couple of years, you can, I'm absolutely sure, win nearly every election. The hard thing is to prove that over a long line. But if you do so, there is trust. And that's why problems of political culture, from my point of view, are so important. Maybe more important than our discussions about political content. If we are, if the people we are talking about feel that left politicians are very intelligent men and are thinking great ideas, but they want to have a drink with them, we can't win. That's the point, and I know that it's difficult to communicate this in a situation, you underline the situation of the media, and it's really a problem, but you can do it also, for example, with the social media. For example, not communicating pictures with some very, very important persons, but being in the hospital and talking with the people there, especially with the working people. So I'm a little bit conservative in this question.
So this is where I then have to ask you a nasty follow-up question. When you say it's about credibility and politicians have to do what they have to do, it's a kind of everybody says this. But does this mean that in reverse the progressives failed the people too often, and this is why there's a lack of trust?
Well, my definition of progressive policy is close to be to people and their interest. For example, I feel in Lower Saxony we have really a challenging situation because we have to rebuild our car industry for being more ecological. And if people really know that you are working for their jobs, and this is the point you are stressing every time, then they follow you. You're also on this way. I have a concrete example. 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting at a very small company in the peripheral region of Lower Saxony, and they all were working for WEIL, but for a diesel. And the plant, or WEIL, they're working for, will be now totally electrified. So they know they will lose their job, if there is no chance to get another product for the company. So I discussed with them what we have to do to change the policy of their company. And after the meeting and after the discussion, well, the shop steward said to me that was the only way to come to their heart, not to talk about something which are not real, but to be very close to the reality, working hard with them together, but then also to do that what we are talking about.
Governor, I see you nodding all the time. What's your take?
Well, I think that's right, and you know, my view is, regardless of the content, what our voters and our citizens are looking for are people who understand the challenges that they face, have a perspective and ideas about how to address those challenges, and they also want somebody who's going to fight for them. And I think of, you know, we've had some great presidents in recent years, President Obama, and before him, President Clinton. President Clinton was famous for saying, "I feel your pain." And this was, you know, sometimes people made fun of it, but he really did understand the challenges that people were going through. He also happened to be a total policy wonk. I mean, he understood that means he really understood the issues in detail. And finally, and I think some people, if they look back at his first campaign, the big turnaround, I think, was in New Hampshire, and he said something along the lines of, "I will be with you until the last dog dies." And the way that the people of New Hampshire, the way that the people of the Democratic Party took that, is he was going to fight for them until the very end. And so I do think, and now we have, there's, even in the presidential campaign as it has started, we have some candidates who are laying out in great, great detail what their policies will be, and others who are saying it's really too early for that, we cannot get too much into the detail until people understand the values that we stand for. We'll see in the end who's right.
And who do you think will be right?
I think it does start with values. I think you know, unfortunately, I think Hillary Clinton would have been an excellent president, but I think in her campaign she was very deep into the policy details pretty quickly, and I think you have to tie it into an overarching narrative. Frankly, the kind of narrative that the Prime Minister laid out in his introductory speech. So I think it's a combination. They do have to believe that you're credible. If it's only platitudes, if it's only, you know, high-end thinking, that only gets you so far. But if it's only policy details, it does not connect to the actual lives that they are living, that's also not enough. And I think one example of that right now, we have a massive problem in the United States that the Europeans don't have around student debt. And so there are some candidates who are saying, we're going to pay off all of your student debt. And that's going to appeal to some. But there are others, and I think appropriately so, who are trying to take an out-of-the-box perspective. And the way it has always worked traditionally in the United States is when you borrow money to go to college, what you repay is what you repay. It does not depend upon how much money you earn. And so now there are new concepts that are developing. They're called income share agreements. And in this case, what you repay is actually based on the income that you make afterwards. And so it's not a matter of the government just writing a check and just forgiving all of this debt, but it's about thinking differently and a little bit out of the box, helping the people solve their own problems.
You also positive, so concrete, so to the solutions. In one of the earlier panels, we heard that one of the advantages of the populists is that they can kind of paint a triangle of fear, which is globalization is bad, I will protect you, migration is bad, I will protect you, terror is bad, I will protect you. So how could a progressive triangle or whatsoever look like?
Well, I think they have an easier argument to make because they keep it very simple. It's appealing. People are nervous because of all these changes. And so I think what progressives have to do is convince them, which should be very easy to do, that we understand exactly what we're going through. But we're not going to offer this simple nonsense solution. We're going to work with them to figure it out. And we are going to fight for them every single day. And I really do believe, and I think, you know, in the end, that's going to be a much more winning argument. I mean, if you look at Donald Trump, he has not enlarged his base. There was a poll out just a few days ago. He has tied his all-time low at 39% in terms of support. It's amazing, frankly, to many of us that he still has 39%. But 39% is not enough to win an election. And so the question is, what does the successful Democrat do? And the successful Democrat must not, in my view, simply focus on turning out our base. We have to win an overwhelming number of Democrats, but we also have to win the independents, and we also have to win some disaffected Republicans. And I think this is one of the battles going on right now in our party. There are some, you know, on the far left who are saying, let's just turn out the base, we're not going to worry about the middle, but that is not how you win a general election for the presidency in the United States.
Marije, let's turn once again to Europe. When I kind of cut you off very unpolitely, you were mentioning the green, which meant that I seem to hear that there's a certain doubt that traditional progressive parties, or rather social democratic parties, are not the ones considered to really lead societies into coping with the change that will come through climate change.
Yes, I think we can see that. Mm-hmm. So it's for me it's a bit surprising because it's like I think that the green and fighting against climate change is a part of our movement, has always been a part of our movement. But apparently a lot of people now see it a bit differently. And so talking about the Netherlands and about Belgium, I think it's also coming from something very simple and realistic. So we're coming from the low countries, meaning that we are living below sea level. And 50% of our country, the Netherlands, is below sea level. And that's exactly the part, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Utrecht, which is like the economical center where most people live. So if nothing is changing in the next 12 years, we will have a serious problem, coming first of all from the rivers entering our countries, and second of all from the seaside, where seawater levels are going to rise. And we now have this advertisement in the Netherlands. It's a young girl, around 8, 9 years old, having an inflatable boat, saying to her mama, "Mommy, Mommy, the good thing about climate change is that I can maybe go to school in my boat." And you have to laugh, like, oh my God, that's really funny. And then it makes you think, like, no, that's not funny at all. But it could be a realistic scenario if nothing is being done. So I think what people want now is to really have more emphasis on that. And so I admire also Greta, the young girl from Sweden, who didn't go to school, to ask, you know, to have more attention for climate change. We have to take this very serious.
Is it really admiring her? Is it not just a bit of envy? There's just a couple of young kids and they're getting the people out on the streets?
No, I think it is. I admire her. I tell my kids every day, they're 9 and 12, this is fantastic what she is doing. Because apparently there were a lot of elderly people, let's say my generation, I call myself an elderly woman in the eyes of my children, and everybody older than me, we are not doing enough. Because if we would have done enough, we wouldn't have been where we are today. So I think it is very good that a young girl is asking attention for such a really dramatic problem. And I think she is very courageous. I think it's also wonderful to see that we have a new generation of young people, of teenagers, who really believe in a democratic system. They believe that politicians can make these changes. It's not because they don't believe in democracy. They believe in democracy, they do it in a peaceful way. But it also means that we have to do much more. And until now, apparently, we have not done enough. So that is, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of people are now supporting the Greens. But what I think is important is that we put this much higher on our own agenda as well.
Stefan, well, was it correct that I saw you nodding that you haven't done enough when it comes to fighting climate change and have an idea of a just transition?
We hadn't done enough. It's obviously, look at the figures of Germany. It's down under, wide down under the line we have to reach. But I think there is a, coming back to your discussion, there's a special function of, in Germany, social democrats. The conservatives, in the end, and I hope I'm not offending anybody here in the room, the conservatives don't really take care about environment and climate. The Greens, they do, but, and I hope Robert Habeck won't be angry with me, they don't care about labor and jobs.
Oh, he will be angry.
And, no, but it's a matter of fact, I feel. And what is the function of social democrats? To demonstrate how you can combine climate protection and jobs for the future. It's the real, I think that is the masterpiece of social democratic parties in the 21st century. And that is what we have to do in Germany now in the next years very hardly.
Is it an issue in the part of Europe you come from, climate? Would you say this is an issue that you can embrace and win votes with?
It's a serious issue. So, of course, you know, in Hungary there is minimum 2 countries. One is Budapest and the county capitals, the big cities. And the other country is the countryside, which is several things: wages, how you get information, the political culture of the people, the tradition of the people, everything. In the cities, in the big cities, of course, where opposition and leftists and green parties are strong, you should know last springtime the opposition and we just won the election in Budapest in the individual districts also. So we beat Fidesz in Budapest, for example. And for the next generation, of course, it's really important. For a German, it should be strange, but MSP, our Social Democrat Party, we have the only common list running in the EU election with a small Green Party of Hungary. Which party's leader should be, I hope, after winning the pre-election, the next joint opposition candidate for the
European Parliament?
No, for Budapest. But the mayor of Budapest, yes. So we are together, of course, as we talked about, because naturally, I think, left and green parties are much more closer than left parties, even liberals or everybody else. It's different countries, different parties, I know, but in Hungary we are together with the Greens, and in some way they are much far leftist in some kind of policies than we. So I think it's no problem. I was here in March 15 in Berlin, and I saw with my own eyes when the young German boys and girls, thousands of them, were marching in the streets, and I asked, what is this? And then I realized that this is the same movement. There is no movement like this in Hungary. You should know we are marching for our life, not for, not our children are marching for their future. We are marching for our present these days. And there were big mass demonstrations in Hungary, but it was because the government raises the extra working hours to 400 hours in a bill like this. So, like in the Middle Age, we have problems like this today.
I have a million other questions that I would like to ask you, and I think it's a fascinating debate, but we only have about 10 minutes left, and I was urged to give you the voice and have you ask questions and help me to kind of get this thing to a great crescendo. So whoever wants to ask a question, raise your hand there in the back, and please be brief.
Hello, good evening. My name is Alice and I work at the FOSA Research Institute and I'm from Lower Saxony. Therefore, I have a question for Stefan WEIL. It's regarding the results of your election in 2017. What is striking about, although you've spoken a lot about the importance of economic values and about the narrative, Lower Saxony is a success story in demobilizing AfD voters. So it's the state, I think, currently with the lowest share of AfD voters and AfD potential, and we have strong states in the rest of Germany as well. But what was, in your analysis, the secret to demobilizing populists?
Will you answer right away? Just for the Americans in the room, the AfD is the populist German party. Would you have a quick response to that one? What did you do? What's your secret?
Well, first of all, we are not a paradise, and we are more votes for the AfD than we wanted to have. But 6.2% below the average of Germany and the other states. I feel there may be some different reasons. One of the most important, from my view, was the attitude. We were doing our job in autumn 2015 and winter 15-16, when a huge number of migrants came to Germany. And as the only of 16 states in Germany, we not did it only as a task for politicians and a state task. We started a movement with the relevant parts of our society, a committee which is called Niedersachsen packt an, so Lower Saxony tackles. And that means that we said we stand also in this situation for an open society in Lower Saxony. Secondly, we support the volunteers. We need it extremely at that time, but also today. And third, we are working together on concepts for integration. And part of this alliance are all the relevant institutions of our society in Lower Saxony. So all the churches, all the associations of the business people, all the trade unions, sport associations, and whatever you want. So there was a very clear position, and everybody in Lower Saxony could have known where this society and the government and the Prime Minister stands for. And I feel that helps a lot 1 year later to say there is no reason to be unsure in Lower Saxony, and I feel that was the best thing we could have done in this in this crisis. It had been a crisis.
Thanks a lot for that precise answer. Then the back.
Yes, thank you. I'm Martin Perret. I'm working for European Alternatives here, based in Berlin. I just have a simple question, or a simple or a complicated one, I don't know. But we talk a lot about credibility, of having credibility, and so it comes with credible policies that actually bring a change to people. And I would like you, it's a question for all of you, sorry, in terms of policies, how do you ensure that the people affected are an integral part of the policy process? And I would like you to be a bit concrete, because also this is what could be a possibility, what could be a plan, basically, to have the most affected be included in these processes, because they are often excluded from it. Thank you.
Maybe we can take this question as when we have the roundup, and you all keep it in mind. So we collect 2 or 3 more inputs, and then we get back to the, oh, you're so tired. No, come on. It's too hot in here. Okay.
Hi, my name is Frank. Could I just ask what the Democratic governor of Delaware is doing on a panel about how to win back the hearts and minds of the ordinary voter, when Delaware is considered a tax haven in America and around the world, and the issue of paying one's fair share of taxes, especially by multinational corporations, is such a great one, which is much too little discussed. So perhaps he could answer that question.
Yeah, it's actually it's only considered a tax haven by people who are unfamiliar with the real situation. Our taxes are no lower than they are elsewhere. The corporations choose to incorporate there because we have a body of law that has been well understood for a long time. it is absolutely, the taxes are, the corporate income taxes are no lower than they are elsewhere. In fact, perhaps we should even lower them.
Okay. In the end, there's another question behind there. Do progressives need like a common tax base? At least not, we won't reach it globally, but is there an aim for another way, or should we aim for another form of globalization where we have kind of the same taxes and we don't compete for the lowest denominator?
Well, I mean, I think a race to the bottom has become a big issue in our country, particularly when it comes to corporate subsidies.
Yeah.
And this is something that I did as other governors did. I think in an ideal world, these kinds of investments would be made into infrastructure, into education, and into workforce development. The problem is that if one or two governors choose to offer these kinds of corporate subsidies, then it's difficult to compete with one or both hands tied behind your back. So I think, you know, in terms of should everybody have the same, that would be very much against the culture of our country, where we have 50 states. The states are laboratories of democracy. We can do things very, very differently, and in the end we see which is more successful. And if another state is having more success, then perhaps there's something about it that we borrow from that state.
Okay, we leave it there. Any other question?
Yes, hello. My name is Alessandro, and I would like to pick up where the gentleman from Hungary left, and he said that there is a conflict between loyalty for the people, which is maybe a term which nowadays in Western Europe is also a bit frightened upon, on one hand, and on the other hand, globalization, global companies. And I would actually like to ask my party friend Stefan this question, because while representing, of course, the people of Lower Saxony, he also represents Volkswagen. And you talked a lot about credibility. I would like to know how you reconcile these two stakeholders, which you have to represent both, and how do you want to fight for credible social cohesion? Thank you.
Okay, we pick one more question, and then we start with you. Is there anybody else? Otherwise, we kind of, yeah, there's.
Hi, thanks very much. Jakob, a concerned scientist. Just a quick question. I think it's a dangerous development and an oversight to associate climate change and that sustainability discussion only with the Green Party. Because climate change is a subject that touches all sorts of issues, social issues, economic issues, and also natural issues. So where are the Social Democrats with a strong position on achieving climate change mitigation and at the same time a just transition to a sustainable future? Why is everybody looking to the Green Party to provide solutions there? I'm not hearing the Social Democrats.
All right. I once learned when I started my career as a journalist that you have to be able to answer every question in 2 minutes. You have to explain the world in 2 minutes. The answer to this question could take you hours. So who's going to start? And keep in mind the other question as well. How can you include voters and enable them instead of giving them the feeling that they can't cope with change? Who wants to start? Stefan, why?
Well, I tried to combine the last and the question before. Let's explain shortly. Lower Saxony has, for historical reasons, 20% of the shares of the world's largest car manufacturing company, Volkswagen, WEIL. And that's why the Prime Minister is traditionally part or member of the supervisory board. And I feel everybody of you know that this is a company which is not only highly important, not only for Lower Saxony, but for a European company, but also in trouble now for 3.5 years because of Dieselgate. And of course, I was always asked in this time, how can you combine your task as a member of the supervisory board and as a prime minister of the country? And the answer is, there is one lesson from Dieselgate. There is no strategy, no successful strategy for a company outside of law and common sense. And since 3.5 years, this company, which is with more than 660,000 employees, one of the largest of the world, is changing itself fundamentally. And that's the link to the other question, whether a social democrat who can, a practical example. Now, the world's largest car manufacturer is the world's #1 in changing his company's products to an environmental fitted strategy. I give you an example. In Lower Saxony now there are 2 plants, I think I was talking about 2 plants, who are now fully electrified, which means with a loss of 7,000 jobs. This you have to explain. And you have to explain this in a way that people understand why their jobs are lost, but you have to explain as well what will go on with them. In this case, we can do so. And that is credibility also in a situation which is not easy. I wasn't sure before my election, my last election, whether all the voters in Lower Saxony would see it in the same way like I do. And I was very happy they did, and that's why I go in this direction.
MARIJE, do you have any quick advice how to win back people and give them the feeling that it's not that everything is decided above their heads?
No, I think, so first of all, about the climate change, this is a very important part of our manifesto. So we have been working on a manifesto for the European elections, doing consultations with our members in all the 28 states, online and offline, to have a short, to-the-point manifesto, which is like the guideline for the next 5 years in European Parliament. And this, I think, has been decided very democratically. So I want people to remember that the European Parliament is not a body you can vote for in a couple of weeks, which is taking decisions above your head. You will vote for people, for example, from the SPD representing you in that European Parliament, in the S&D group, who are then representing progressives in Europe. And you can hold them accountable because in 5 years' time they have to run again for elections. And the next 5 years you can use to have a proper dialogue with these people, because I think people elected in a parliament, in a European Parliament, are human beings who shall have a conversation with their voters. So grab the opportunity and do that. Then I think we have to become more inclusive. I already said that earlier today, but I think this is really, really important. And when I look at this audience tonight, I'm very proud to see so many women, to see people from different ethnic backgrounds, to see young people. I think it's encouraging. But I just want to make one remark. It's a pity that only guys are here asking questions. So I think, sorry, in the next round, yeah, but you and me, we are 2 women, but there's a room full of women who have very good questions, and I think we have to offer more space for people to participate in our structures, because if we want to change, we cannot only go for policy, we also have to talk about communication, we also have to talk about representation. And I think it's really, really important that if you want to have this movement, let's say, the progressive movement, to become stronger, we have to become more inclusive. It's very, very important. My last point is, on the policy side, there was something said about tax havens. I think we have to continue the fight against tax havens, even step it up, because we can have a debate about shall we synchronize all taxes everywhere. I think it's a nonsense debate, because it will not bring us anywhere in the end. What will bring us somewhere is that everybody has to pay its fair share. It's not fair that after the economic crisis, it's still possible for some people to park their money in some tropical paradises, drive our roads, bring the kids to our schools, go to our hospitals, and make us all pay and not pay themselves. That's not solidarity. So I think if we want to have more money for education, for infrastructure, for healthcare, for elderly care, then we should not look into all kind of, let's say, difficult measures. We just make sure that everybody is going to pay their fair share. And this is something Social Democrats are heavily promoting in the next 5 years. And I hope that you will all vote for a Social Democratic Party, because then we can change.
Into campaigning. TAMÁS.
When I was talking about whether we are serving globalization or our people, our voters, I think in this situation I have to ask back, what should a Prime Minister of Low Saxony should do? in this situation? Saving the jobs of the people as a social democrats, or close the company and say, hi, I'm green? This is a big conflict, yes, and I don't want to be cynical, but look, the only good solution, what I heard, but I don't know the details, if you can save the job and force the company not to lie, cheat, and blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, I think our good old supporters in this unsure world want somebody who can protect them. Many guests talked about it prior. Who can guide them, who can lead them, who can protect them. So if you see Trump, if you see Orban, they show that they can lead, and they created a false politics about how you should, as a voter, as a resident, fear, not scare, fear from, for example, in Hungary, the non-existent migrants. In this situation, leftists also, progressives also have to understand that in a war, because it's war, ladies and gentlemen, you have to, I'm not sure use, but to know the tools of your enemy. Because if we do, and if we use the good old tools, what we did, we will fall everywhere. And this is my warning to everybody else. And just as the last word, you don't know, but I just lived in these 10 years in this country, my country, where I grow up. From 1990, I grew up in a democratic country. I lived so little in the socialism, so-called socialism. You know, they say freedom is like air you breathe. You only feel how important it is when you cannot breathe. And we are dying in this country. And democracy and institutions of democracy are the same. Everybody takes it granted. In whole Western Europe, in the United States, everybody took it granted in Hungary also. And when you cannot get your right in a court, when you are kicked out from a company because of your political view, and I can go on, then you realize what I'm talking about. So please, Greens, Reds, Liberals, everybody who are for what we believe in, we have to cooperate and we have to fight against these populists all around the world.
I would actually say those were great final words. One of the reasons why we love Americans, even though it might be a cliche, Governor, is that you always find an optimistic note to kind of lead us into the rest of the evening. Is there anything you would like to add? I know it's a tough job.
Well, look, I think this is an unbelievably important conversation. I think so long as we're open to learning from each other, we will do well. And I think we should take nothing for granted, but I really do feel like in 2 years we'll be having a very different conversation about what's taking place in our country.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you.